Today we'll be talking about the Tier 10 heavy cruiser, the Monmouth, which is part of the British Navy, the Royal Navy, and it actually has 234mm guns, which you may have already recognized as Gibraltar's guns. However, these guns are very different in terms of performance to Gibraltar's guns because they have much better penetration, and they also maintain having the improved AP angles, the bounce angles, compared to a normal cruiser like a Goliath or any other basic cruiser that does not have improved AP angles. Otherwise, ship itself is fairly standard in terms of the armor layer. There is no interesting spaced armor or black hole armor, as we like to call sometimes, part of the ship. The ship's hull is very straightforward in terms of the way it's designed. It's 25mm bow and stern, has a 30mm sides and deck, with the exposed citadel being only 178mm. The one thing that is always worth noting when you are dealing with this type of a ship is that it actually has a stepped citadel. So if you are kiting away and you get overmatched through the stern or even the bow of the ship, the step can be a really big factor in you getting citadel or not, because the citadel deck itself is actually fairly thick. 102mm and 89mm means that there will be no battleship AP salvo that can overmatch this. So it's only going to be actual pens that can citadel you if you're getting overmatched in the citadel itself, into the citadel, that is. Other than that, ship has a lot of HP. Actually, it has 67,000 HP. I'm running survivability, of course, the survivability expert, because you should be running that on all cruisers, especially ones that have improved heals. For example, the Monmouth, which has a super heal. This helps with the ship survivability significantly, as it does not have that many survivability related, let's say, perks going for it. You're a very straightforward and vanilla cruiser, so to say. In terms of my build, I am going to be running main armaments mod 1, engine room protection, aiming systems mod 1, steering gears mod 1. Usually in this slot you would be running something like propulsion mod, but because this ship already has improved acceleration built into the ship, you don't need to build propulsion mod into it. You instead pick steering gears just to improve your survivability and your maneuverability a bit more. Concealment, because the better your concealment, the more aggressively you can play and the better you are able to get into certain positions. So it's very important to have as good of concealment as possible. And then last slot, I'm playing with reload mode to buff my main guns as good as in terms of the reload as much as possible, because the range on the ship is actually pretty good. 19.8 km for a large cruiser with these guns that are fairly accurate and consistent. You don't really need any more range on them. So I'm running reload mode to make my reload a bit better, to improve my DPM against ships that are gonna give me broadside or even just sit in front of me. For my captain, I'm actually running a slightly odd build with outnumbered, and I'll go through why I'm doing this. I'm running grease the gears, last stand, priority target, survivability expert and superintendent, as well as AR for 3-point skills. Concealment, as same reasons as I mentioned before, to make sure that the concealment is as good as possible. With full concealment build, it's a 11.5 km detectability, which is actually fairly good for a ship that has this big of guns and has fairly good maneuverability due to it having Royal Navy acceleration built into the ship. The outnumbered is an interesting one because I intend to play the ship towards the flanks, and if you are used to playing ships like the Marseille or even the Sevastopol, where sometimes you want to be running outnumbered, the ship synergizes very well with it because you can have a lot of speed. Actually, Castilla is a good example of outnumbered usage as well, where you want to have as much speed as possible when you're on the flank to help with the dodging and the repositioning aspect of it, but also the dispersion. It will help a lot with potentially sniping people across the map because you have all of the range. And once you have outnumbered proc, the dispersion actually becomes pretty disgustingly good. The other alternative is dropping outnumbered and dropping a 1-point skill, so you have 5 points remaining. You're probably gonna end up picking heavy AP and a 2-point skill. My best guess is something like consumables enhancement or focus fire training is not a bad option. But heavy AP generally is a good pick for this ship because you only have AP. There is no HE available for the ship. So buffing your only ammo type for a 3-point skill is not that bad, given that you don't have any other, like picking demo expert, for example, would not do anything for this ship. Okay, so I think I have rambled on for long enough. Probably like 10-ish minutes or 5 minutes, not too bad. So let's just start off with some live gameplay and hopefully be able to showcase some of the strengths and weaknesses of the ship and how I intend to play the ship. Okay, so looking at the matchmaking immediately, things to note are things that will overmatch you. So since you have a 30mm midsection and deck, the things that overmatch you are battleships that have 457mm guns or bigger, which means that in this game, we're actually quite lucky with only one battleship on the enemy team being able to overmatch our midsection, which is the Loria. But he will most likely be shooting AP way more than shooting any other, SAP more than AP, which means that the overmatch is not actually that impactful, as once he overmatches the outer layer of our deck or sides, he will arm immediately and get pen damage and not be able to access the citadel. If he does shoot AP, however, we will need to be careful about him. Other than that, Moskva is a good target, Jinan is a good target, Hindenburg is also a good target. Hindenburg, actually, you don't overmatch, but you outspot by quite a distance. I think Hindenburg has 12.6 kilometer concealment at best, which means that you outspot him by 1.1 kilometers while having much better gun power compared to him, as well as much better survivability because of the improved heal, the super heal in this case, and having just on base way more HP. As long as it's a 1v1 trade, you should be winning that one. Jinan is actually a cruiser that you overmatch because he's a super light cruiser and you have 234mm guns. So if we end up fighting him, it will be a really unfavorable fight for him unless I eat some torps. That is always a concern. Other than that, fairly standard matchmaking. There is the Jinan is in a division with the U2501. So if I know where the Jinan is, I know where the sub is, and I can play accordingly against them. In general, I'm still playing basically to find the broadsides wherever possible because you only have AP. So unless you actually see some angled ships, if they are going completely bow into you, you're going to do very marginal damage. So I will actually just start off by playing on this island, hopefully with my U4501 and Kleber being able to spot for me. And if we get open flank, then I will start making my way down very quickly. Okay, looks like the Moskva is not interested in pushing here. And I do want to shoot his broadside, so I will actually make my move right now. It's a bit risky, but it could be very worthwhile if we get some citadels on him early on, and maybe even a second salvo depending on if we're lucky. 27k is not a bad start to the game. That looks like a Schlieffen. I believe that is in fact a Schlieffen. Devastation shooting AP in the back. And there's a Shimakaze next to me as well. Okay. So I will actually pop my Hydro early. I don't expect there to be Shimakaze torps just yet, but maybe I'll be able to kite from the start because I know the Schlieffen will be interested in making a very aggressive push. Don't necessarily want to sit bow in to a Schlieffen push. So I will start kiting. I should be more than fast enough to dodge these torps because of the improved acceleration. I actually maintain my speed on during the turn, which is not something most cruisers are capable of doing. When you turn, you lose a lot of speed compared to like ships that have improved acceleration parameters. So this is something that definitely helped out there. Actually, it's not the Schlieffen, it's a Libertad. But there is also a Schlieffen in this game that has not been spotted yet, so it could be both. I'm curious if we're gonna see them anytime soon. With my Libertad actually pushing this aggressively, I am inclined to help him out and also turn in now. because the deeper I go down the flank, the better angles I will have on the Moskva as well as the Hinden. Those will be my two main targets in this game. But also, we have more than enough penetration to actually get consistent pens on the Libertad side, assuming we get his broadside. But for now, we're not in big threat to not make this push. So I'm gonna take as much ground as possible when given by the enemy team. This is Shimakaze. He is, I think that's his only torp set right now. So unless the Libertad actually gets dev struck by them, he should live. Okay, he lived. And he's in my Hydra for a little bit of time. So those secondaries will be shredding the man. And hopefully we are able to help out a little bit. Okay. We didn't really do any damage to him, but hopefully the Hydra helped him out nonetheless. There was a Schlieffen on this flank, I was correct, but he did leave immediately. So I'm gonna start just farming the Devastation to begin with. I think he's the biggest threat on this flank for me at this point. And I want to end up on this island actually, so that I have some island cover near me in case these guys all decide to turn around and start pushing at some point. The good part here, obviously, being that I am still basically in control of my concealment and detection, because we know that the sub as well as all the destroyers are already spotted on the other flank. So I'm basically able to, at will, disengage from this engagement, go stealth, and heal up if needed. I doubt it's going to be required because all of these BBs that are shooting at me don't overmatch me. Libertad has only 419mm guns, same with the Devastation, so I'm basically free to play however I want to. As long as I don't give broadside randomly, I should be fairly safe. What is important to note on this ship is that while it is a large cruiser in terms of gun caliber, it does not have 60-second fires, which is actually very impactful in terms of its survivability. And that will help out massively once we actually get into the fight with the Hindenburg, assuming we get into a fight with the Hindenburg. 2 splash hits on the sub, which is really good. The man is losing like 8k HP for that little spot. I will actually pop my Hydro in case there is more torps coming. But I'm currently only spotted because of the Moskva's radar. So once the radar ended, which it just did, I should be able to stealth fire on this Hindenburg over the island, and means that I can basically farm some damage for free. However, if this Moskva continues reversing, I will go forward very aggressively to try and punish that if possible, assuming I catch him in time. But for now, I'm more than happy to just sit here and shoot at the Hindenburg, because he's the one who's going to be farming our Libertad and GK. And actually, Hindenburg against GK engagement is very unfavorable because the Hinden has 50mm of HE penetration, which is the exact number that the GK's deck is. So you don't want to get farmed by a guy that can pen you everywhere, essentially. There is a potential opportunity here to make even more aggressive play to go to the island on the opposite side, basically, as the Moskva is sitting on right now. I don't know if that is the correct play given the situation with the Mecklenburg coming back, but I think it may not be that bad of an idea, given that Libertad is also kiting away basically into their spawn. So I'm gonna actually make this play move up a bit more so that I have even better positioning. And with outnumbered proc now, my dispersion actually is fairly nice. Unfortunately, I misaimed a bit, aimed a bit too far forward, so the shells did not quite hit where they would have gotten pens, but that's okay. At least the speed improvement that we're going to get from outnumbered procking here is going to be significant and definitely very helpful in this sort of pushing situation. I see the Libertad actually has decided to turn back and start pushing us. So I need to start preparing myself for the potential push from him. I just need to be prepared to, have my torps or orient my ship in a way where I can use my torps in case he comes around the corner. And I do expect him to do that at some point during this game if he decides to do it and commit towards me. Okay, sub is now pinging me as well, so I'm gonna start moving forward. Actually use the island correctly against these guys, because considering the amount of pressure I'm getting from them. Don't really wanna get focused down by 4+ ships with nothing to protect me. And in this case, the island is gonna be a really positive thing to have near me and this move, because I can block the torpedoes that will be thrown out by the U-2501 with the island instead of just tanking them. And there they are. Okay. Schlieffen is now pushing in. I will drop my torps, expecting him to actually slow down and turn in a bit. I am showing a lot of broadside to him though. I'm actually more worried about the devastation than the Schlieffen, but let me just pop my heal and start reversing. Assuming the Schlieffen has Hydro, he will have seen my torps now, which means that he either turns in hard or he just has not seen them and will eat them. But it looks like he's dodging them, and I will just go behind the island for the time being. Let someone else take some fire from me in the meantime, and keep shooting over the island. One of the key things that is part of cruiser gameplay is being able to use islands effectively, and this ship is no different to most of them. Was a fairly straightforward win, I would say. We didn't really have to make any huge plays. I would say the most impactful thing we did was the salvo on the Moskva at the start of the game. Third on score, not too bad. Damage is kind of meaningless in this one, to be honest, because we did not have a pushing flank on our side. Generally, you want to be receiving the push where possible, because that is where you are able to farm up the most damage and the most impact, or be on the pushing side yourself, where you're able to push a flank and force the enemy team into doing some mistakes. In that game in particular, we had no real reason to make a pushing play, especially with the 4 battleships in the enemy team spawn who were just waiting for you to make a push into them. And generally, as a cruiser of any kind, even a large cruiser, light cruiser, whatever it may be, pushing into battleships, even ones that don't overmatch you, is generally going to be very difficult for you to trade effectively and positively, because eventually they will hit your bow, get some overmatch damage, maybe even get some sits through your bow, or just penetrate you in the superstructure and randomly, do some damage to you, which you're not really able to consistently trade back.